Well, hey everybody, we've come to the middle of the week today in our Bible reading plan. We are in Psalm 78. If Psalms 76 and 77 were short, Psalm 78 is a long one. This psalm recounts Israel's history, if you will, and all of the great things God did in their history, going back to the time of the Exodus from Egypt, all the way up to the day David was ruling as king in the city of Jerusalem. And he describes the blessings of God on the people of God, all of his work on their behalf. He also describes in this psalm the way the people sinned, their failure to trust God and to obey God. And he describes at times the way God disciplined them, God punished them, and how they responded to that. He also describes God's compassion and the way God had compassion on them and blessed them in spite of their rebellion. All of that is in this psalm. So what is the reason Asaph wrote this really long, reflective psalm? Well, look at verses 1 and following. He says, "Listen, O my people, to my instruction. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us." Our ancestors told us. They passed on the stories of what God had done in the past. "We will not conceal them from their children." We're not going to hide them from our kids and grandkids. "But tell to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wondrous works that he has done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded." Notice, he commanded our fathers that they should teach them to their children, that the generation to come might know, even the children yet to be born. And then continuing in verse 6, that they may arise and tell them to their children, to the children of the children who haven't been born yet, that they should put their confidence in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and not, notice this in verse 8, not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that did not prepare its heart, and whose spirit was not faithful to God. So why did he write this psalm that summarized Israel's history from the Exodus to David and all the great things that God had done? It was so the generations to come, the kids that were and the kids that were yet to be born, would know, and that their faith would be strengthened, and hopefully they would do better than their fathers, their parents. That hopefully they would do better than their grandparents, do better than their ancestors. In America, a lot of emphasis on wanting the generation to come, our children and grandchildren, if you will, to do better than us financially, do better than us educationally, to do better than us athletically. And man, we put a lot of time and resources and effort into those areas. What about spiritually? I'm afraid that a lot of people who go to church put a lot of effort and money into their kids being successful athletically. But when you compare that to what they put into them being successful spiritually, to being a growing disciple, oh, they want their kids to, we want our kids, our grandkids to be successful spiritually, but we don't put the same effort into it. We don't put the same amount of money into it. We don't put the same time into it. And the truth is, spiritually, we're seeing the results. See, our kids watch us. They don't just hear what we say, they watch what we do, and they know whether or not God really has our heart and life. They know what we are. They know what we are most passionate about. They know if you're more passionate about education. They know if you're more passionate about athletics. They know if you're more passionate about money. They know if you're more passionate about having fun than you are about Jesus. They know. No matter what you say, they know. And the author of this psalm is trying to address that. And he says something, I think, very important, very powerful in verses 32 and following of Psalm 78. He says, starting at verse 32, in spite of all this, all that God had done, they sinned and did not believe in his wonderful works. Verse 33, so he brought their days to an end in futility, their years in sudden terror, when he killed them, and then they sought him. He judged them, and once he judged them severely, verse 34, they sought him, they sought God, and returned and searched diligently for God. Sounds good, right? Going to get right with God. Verse 35, they remembered that God was their rock, and the Most High God, and the Most High God, their Redeemer. But, looked like they were getting right with God. But, verse 36, they deceived him. They deceived God. They lied to God with their mouth and lied to him with their tongue. For their heart was not steadfast toward him, nor were they faithful to his covenant. A lack of real love and devotion. In other words, they professed to get right with God. They made some changes, but their heart was not devoted to God. He's not talking about just having an emotional faith. What he's getting at is like, all right, my wife, and she has my heart. When your spouse has your heart, and you love them, and you're devoted to them, it always shows up in how you treat them. Shows up in your priorities, how you deal with stuff, how you value them. When God has your heart, God will have your life and everything else in your life. And the truth is, the kids know if you're just talking the talk or if God really has your heart. And if you want the next generation to be right with God, you need to be right with God. If you want the next generation to celebrate the great things of God, you need to celebrate the things of God. And if you want the next generation to have a heart devoted to God, remember Jesus said, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. If you want that for your kids and your grandkids, you better let them see that in you. Otherwise, you're just playing games and lying to God, and it doesn't work. It never works. Let God have your heart so you can teach by example the generations to come how God can have their heart. And that's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at Psalm 79.